Good morning, honored graduating students, faculty, colleagues, staff, family, friends, and guests. I'm Robert Hutchings, Dean of the Lyndon B. Johnson School of Public Affairs, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome all of you to this commencement ceremony for the extraordinary class of 2013. Now, before we begin with the official proceedings, let me first recognize my lovely wife, Kim, in the front row, and extend a special welcome to those who join me on stage, Associate Dean for Academic Affairs, Chandler Stolp, and Associate Professor of Public Affairs, Shama Gamkar. And let me give special recognition to our 2013 PhD candidates, of which we have 11, making this our largest PhD graduating class in the history of the school, and of course the best. So as you PhD candidates reach this milestone of scholarly excellence, we salute you and we share your relief that the end is finally in sight. To all of you in the graduating class of 2013, let me be the first to congratulate you. Addressing you at orientation 2 years ago, I urged you to take advantage of the wealth of opportunities provided by the school and the university. I challenged you to get out of your comfort zones and stretch yourselves both intellectually and professionally. And I challenged you to be change agents, to take on the tough issues and to make a difference in people's lives and to our global society. And I'm proud to say that you leave us well-equipped to do just that. I know this because I've seen you in action these past 2 years. In internships and volunteer work from Palestine to Paris, from Ethiopia to Israel, from Washington, D.C. to Rio de Janeiro, in 19 countries spanning 5 continents, you have already put your LBJ brand of leadership skills to work. In over 100 internships, ranging from the offices of Texas state legislators, to the Office of Homeland Security, the Office of Naval Intelligence, to nonprofits like the World Wildlife Federation and the Rainforest Initiative, to research organizations like the Urban Institute and Ascend at the Aspen Institute, and advocacy groups like the ACLU and Texas Appleseed. In these and many other activities closer to home, you are making an impact, and we know that you have just begun. You will be the game changers and the difference makers. All of us at the LBJ School take great pride and pleasure in working with you, with students and rising leaders who want to make the world a better place and are willing to do it one person, one project at a time. It's what I like to call applied idealism. You have inspired us, and I hope we have inspired you. This brings me to our distinguished guest of honor this morning, who knows a lot about applied idealism. It is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Helene Gayle, President and CEO of CARE USA, who will deliver this year's Convocation address. An expert on health, global development, and humanitarian issues, Dr. Gayle has made a positive and lasting change throughout her exceptional career. Let me just mention some of the highlights. Dr. Gayle has an MD from the University of Pennsylvania, a master's in public health from Johns Hopkins, and a BA in psychology from Barnard College. As CEO and president of CARE USA, she leads a global organization of over 10,000 in one of the world's foremost international humanitarian organizations. Her poverty-fighting programs reached 122 million people last year in 84 countries. Since joining CARE in 2006, she has led efforts to reinforce CARE's commitment to empowering girls and women. Prior to CARE, she spent 20 years with the Centers for Disease Control, working primarily on HIV/AIDS issues. She's also worked with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, directing programs on HIV/AIDS and other global health issues. Dr. Gayle and her work have been featured in many national and international media outlets. Forbes named her one of the 100 most powerful women, and she made Foreign Policy magazine's list of the top 100 global thinkers and Newsweek's list of the top 10 women in leadership. Dr. Gayle, on behalf of the LBJ School community, thank you for being with us today and for all you do as a global force for good. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Helene Gayle.
Thank you so much, Dean Hutchings, the distinguished faculty, family, friends, and invited guests. It really is wonderful for me to be here, and we had a little opportunity to talk last evening about this incredible class and this incredible school, and it makes me even more proud to be able to be here and more in awe of what this school does. I also want to give a special thanks to Shirley Franklin, who is the Barbara Jordan Professor of Ethics and Political Values. But more than that, to me, she is my former mayor from Atlanta. She's a longtime friend of CARE and a real friend and supporter for me as well. She is the example of what excellence in public policy and leadership is all about. So I really want to thank Shirley for helping me be here today, so thank you. Now, President Lyndon B. Johnson had a bold vision for this school: to produce thinkers and doers, people who would dream of progress and who will turn those dreams into achievement. That's an impressive mission, and I'm so impressed, as I said, with what this school has achieved in just over 40 years, developing public service leaders who seek solutions for the complex problems facing us in our world. And I'm so impressed with you graduates. I heard about your conviction and dedication to making the world a better place, but also about your victory in winning the 2013 Dillo Cup. So, hook 'em horns, as I guess you all say here. But for all those reasons, it really is a great honor to speak with you. But it's also a bit daunting. You know, it was once said that the job of a commencement speaker is like the body at a wake. Everybody needs you to be there, but nobody really wants you to say too much. But all jokes aside, for me, being here with you today is really a gift, because it provides me one of those rare opportunities to slow down for a moment and to reflect on my own journey. And I hope that it also gives you a chance to pause for a moment with no pressure, no expectations, no exams following this talk, just a chance to celebrate your accomplishments and to think a little bit about how you want this next step in your journey to unfold, what you want the next chapter of your life to be. When you return for your reunion 10 years, 20 years, even 50 years from now, what do you want to say about what you did with your career? How do you want to be able to measure your impact? Now, part of that's defined by the world that you're graduating into. You're graduating into a world of paradox, a world increasingly unequal, divided, yet with more promise and opportunity than ever before. On one hand, there's a growing wedge between the extremely wealthy and those who lack even the basic necessities to survive. We have complex crises like the tragedy in Syria, the mounting tensions and threats of nuclear confrontation in North Korea and Iran. Our country is increasingly hamstrung by a deeply divided political environment. And our world grapples with big transnational global issues like climate change, overpopulation, a scramble for natural resources, and acts of terrorism. Yet on balance, our world is wealthier, healthier, more peaceful, and more connected than ever before. We have unprecedented resources and knowledge to solve problems that long seemed intractable. Let me offer a few examples of that. So when I was in school, information technology was a handheld calculator. Now technology links us with the world in an instant, bringing about sweeping changes, just like the role we saw of the internet and the cell phone in the Arab Springs. In the fight against poverty, we see the private sector, government, nonprofits, and philanthropists joining forces in innovative alliances. We see vibrant civil societies advocating for social equality, and we see investments in girls and women boosting economic and social gains in even the world's poorest communities. So given that context, and given the degree that you're about to attain, the question is, what role will you play? Now, if there's one lesson I learned, and I hope you've learned in your time here, is that we don't have to accept the status quo. President Johnson knew this. Next year marks the 50th anniversary of two of his most ambitious efforts, the War on Poverty and the Civil Rights Act. Both sought to ensure that people had opportunities for meaningful, fulfilling lives and the ability to pursue their dreams. Now, physician and Nobel Prize winner Albert Schweitzer once said, "I don't know what your destiny will be, but one thing I know, the only ones among us who will really be happy are those who will have sought and found how to serve." Now, everybody has to find their own way to do this, and there's no secret formula to building a happy and a successful life. But let me take a few moments to share some thoughts about things that have helped me to chart my path along the way. First, follow your passion. Great breakthroughs in life don't come about when one is half-hearted. They require people who are invested, engaged, and passionate. Find your passion and hang on to it, even when, especially when, it's hard to see your way forward. Afghanistan was one of the first countries I traveled to when I started my job at CARE. While there, I had the chance to visit a lot of the schools that we had helped to start. You know, when the Taliban came to power, one of the first things they did was to prohibit the teaching of young girls. This legacy remained in many parts of Afghanistan and in neighboring Pakistan, and I'm sure many of you have heard about Malala Yousafzai, who became a hero for standing up for the rights of girls to be educated, and we know she paid a huge price for that. Similarly, some of you may remember a story in the news a couple of years ago about two sisters in Afghanistan, Atifa and Shamsia, and this story really stood out for me. These two girls were walking to school one morning when two men on a motorcycle pulled alongside of them. One of the men asked where the girls were going. Shamsia told them she was going to school. The men immediately pulled out a plastic squirt gun, aimed it, and sprayed acid in their faces. Atifa and Shamsia will be disfigured for life and marked by the trauma of this situation, this incident in many ways. However, when asked if she would stop attending school, one of the girls told a reporter that they could spray her 100 more times and she would still go to school. She said, "I want other girls to have the chance for an education. I want our country to persevere. I have to do something for my country. I must go to school." Now that's passion. My own passion and commitment to social justice came early. I grew up in a family where giving back to the community was core to our family values. As a teenager in Buffalo, New York, in the mid-'60s, I was greatly influenced by the social activism of the times, the civil rights movement, the women's movement, anti-Vietnam War protests, liberation struggles in Africa. I saw the power of collective action causing change, and grew up wanting to be part of something bigger than myself. I wanted to contribute to creating lasting social change. Ultimately, I chose medicine and public health as tangible routes to make a difference in something that was so core to human existence, health. One of the wisest pieces of advice I've heard on that subject is from the legendary preacher Howard Thurman. He said, "Don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive, and then go and do that, because the world needs people that have come alive." So second thought, remain open to the unexpected. I once heard a wildlife biologist describe the importance of keeping a soft focus when tracking animals. The idea is that when you zero in too quickly on what you're seeking, you can miss something even better in the periphery. My career is a fine example of that fact, that you never know where you're going to end up, and why it's important to embrace the unpredictable. Going back again to when I was growing up, I did a lot of protesting: racism, sexism, apartheid, bras, you name it. I protested it, particularly if it was the government. So consider the irony that I later worked for 20 years for the Federal Centers for Disease Control. But joining the CDC was the best decision I ever made. By then, I had realized that a career in health could be an amazing path to contributing to social change, and that being for something was much better route than being against everything. So working at the CDC allowed me to do that on a broad scale. Likewise, I never would have imagined as a student that one day I would end up the head of an agency focused on fighting global poverty. I went to school to be a doctor. But ultimately, ending poverty is a way to save lives on a mass scale. And so coming to CARE gave me a chance to focus on the very issues of inequity and social injustice that led me into medicine in the first place. Third, be persistent. Anyone who has ever set out to do something bold has experienced setbacks. That's just the reality. Anyone who has ever achieved something bold also knew that they had to keep going. Another remarkable former US president is President Jimmy Carter. Now, President Carter is one of the most persistent people there is. The Carter Center aims to eradicate guinea worm, a crippling disease that has been reduced by about 99% as a result of the Carter Center's efforts. Sudan, however, hosts one of the world's few remaining cases. And a few years ago, the country's civil war was stymieing the eradication efforts there. So President Carter employed a very interesting tactic. He arranged an interview with CNN to directly follow his meeting with the Sudanese president. He walked into the president's office and said that the nation of Guinea had eradicated guinea worm. And he warned that if the president didn't call for a ceasefire so that the planned eradication activities in Sudan could occur, he would tell Sudan that they had just renamed the disease Sudanese worm. Not surprisingly, a ceasefire was called. In my case, when I started my career at CDC in the mid-'80s, I was dissuaded from working on AIDS. At that time, it was this newly discovered virus, and people counseled me to stay away because it was just a medical curiosity, it would be quickly solved, and it would never have any great public health impact. I didn't heed that advice, and almost 30 years later, I'm proud to say that I've made some small contribution to the global progress that we've made in halting death and suffering due to HIV/AIDS. So be persistent and stick to your convictions. Finally, think big, think bold, and believe in the possible. Helen Keller said, "No pessimist ever discovered the secret of the stars or sailed to an uncharted land or opened a new doorway for the human spirit." CARE's bold mission is to end extreme poverty. I'm asked all the time why I think that's possible and whether I think that it's actually even possible in our lifetime. I think that both of those things are true. I think it's possible, and I think it's possible in our lifetime. Why do I think that? Well, I think that because of people like Goretti Nyabenda, a mother of 6 from Burundi in Central Africa. Like many poor women, Goretti was denied basic rights and opportunity. Her husband refused to let her go out of the house alone. He abused her and drank away what little money they had. CARE helped Goretti take out a $2 loan to buy fertilizer. She invested the money and became an entrepreneur with livestock and a small shop. When her husband became ill, Goretti was able to pay for his medical expenses. She can now afford to send her children to school and provide them a chance for a better life. Now, Goretti told her story a couple of years ago at CARE's National Conference in Washington, D.C. She'd never been out of Africa, never out of Burundi, and now she was the guest of honor at a gala event in the capital of the United States. She stood up and spoke about all the changes that one small loan had brought to her life. She spoke through an interpreter, but her joy and her pride needed no translation. Before a black tie audience of hundreds of total strangers, she was poised, she was passionate, she was confident. So it's Goretti and people like Goretti that I meet in my job that make me confident that our goal of eliminating extreme poverty is possible, and it's possible in our lifetime. But history is full of those kind of examples, of people who achieved because they believed in what others thought was impossible. In 1961, John F. Kennedy pledged that the US would put a man on the moon by the end of the decade. Skeptics said it couldn't be done, but 8 years later, Neil Armstrong took a giant leap for humanity. Smallpox killed more than 500 million people and plagued humanity since the beginning of time. But because of courageous and visionary public health leaders, it was wiped off the face of the earth as a disease in 1979. And in 1955, the year I was born, Rosa Parks said no to racial discrimination. 2 years later, 9 brave students in Little Rock broke the color barrier in school. And within 2 decades, Americans elected and re-elected their first African-American president. Each of these victories were achieved for one reason, because people believed they could do it. So find your passion and stay with it. Remain open to the unexpected. Be persistent and believe in what's possible. My hope for each of you is that you will engage broadly with the world around you, that you'll find ways to apply your talents, your education, your unique gifts to the benefit of our world, that you say, our world can be better than this, and then go out and contribute to making that true. Seize those challenges, make them opportunities, go and make your mark on the world. What starts here changes the world. Congratulations, LBJ School, class of 2013. The world awaits you.